All right, so this is what's sometimes called as the Eitz Chaim, the tree of life. What it really is it's a schema of what are called the 10 spheros. How many of you have heard of the 10 spheros? Yes? Okay, great, good. So now we have two people. Good, I thought most of you would have at least seen something like this before. All right, so I want to describe what this is because last week we spoke about the pattern of threes in the universe and reality. The week before that we spoke about the fundamental makeup of the universe. That's the balance of two major elements, forces in reality. This week we're going to move along to 4, and in order to do that we need to just jump a little bit to 10. So the way that we explained this previously is that there are that Kabbalah, amongst other things, tries to describe in a certain sense, the periodic table of reality, right? So in the material world, we have these basic elements, which we now know aren't the most basic things, right? But using that, we can build lots of other things out of them. So the same thing is true with metaphysical reality, that when we're talking about what energies and forces make up our reality, the kabbalistic teachings tell us that they boil down to 10. So they look in a certain sense like this, and this should not be so intimidating because really they kind of boil down to less than 10. So if anybody wants to just take a look and just have one for yourself, and that way you can follow along with me. So as you'll see, the way that the schema is set up is that they are organized. It's very interesting. I like the metaphor of the periodic table because you know how in the periodic table they've set it up in such a way that the ones that are vertically in the same row share very similar properties, right? So the same idea is true here with this schema. So what you have is you have all of the qualities, the attributes on the right, Chachma, Chesed, Netzach. You have all the attributes on the left, Bina, Gevura, Hod, and then you have all the ones in the center. And if we can start to plug things in, so those who have been here in the past, when we started, we said that there are two fundamental principles, properties of the universe. One that is creation, expansion, kindness, outgoing, breadth, right? Things that want to be all-inclusive and connect. And the other element is that which seeks to limit, define, conceal, cut off, discipline, right? So we said that this balance is what keeps the universe in existence because creation involves expansion, but survival and existence involves limitation. And this balance of these two is what creates a healthy human, it's what creates a healthy society, et cetera, et cetera. Essentially, you're going to find all of the expansion elements on the right side of the chart and all of the contraction elements on the left side of the chart. The only difference is, as you'll see on the left, they've very conveniently added ways in which you can chunk the top 3, the middle 3, and then the bottom 3. We'll talk about the one at the very bottom soon. But essentially, these attributes, if you were to take all these building blocks, they express themselves as a microcosm of the human being. It's interesting. A lot of the deeper texts refer to the world as a macrocosm of a human being, and vice versa. We say that a human being is an olam katan, a mini world. So, anyone familiar with the word fractal? Anyone know what a fractal is? What's a fractal, Alan?
It's like an infinite picture with shapes in it.
Yes, close. We can get a bit more detail than that. You know what a fractal is? So fractal is a pattern where the pattern is expressed no matter how far in you zoom and how far out you zoom. So the picture will always be the same. So, for example, in nature, you would find a fractal in the shape of a tree, because if you look more closely at a branch, the branch kind of looks like a mini tree. And if you look more closely at a leaf, the veins of the leaf kind of look like a mini branch. So the closer in you get and the farther out you get, that's what a fractal is, okay? So the universe is also fractilic, where if you take a unit of, let's say, a human being, and then you zoom out, the human being actually looks like or represents the whole universe, Okay? So just as a human being is made up of a cognitive element, an emotional element, and a physical element, the head, heart, and body, so too, all of the forces of the universe can also be broken down into those things as well. Okay? So last week we spoke about some of these patterns of three, right? We spoke about the idea of there being a Abraham and Isaac and a Jacob personality. The Abraham being one who is very other-oriented, the Isaac personality being internally oriented, and the Jacob being somewhere the balance between the two. He's neither totally concerned with the other, but not totally concerned with himself. He kind of places his identity somewhat objectively, like right here, right? And says, well, what's the objectively right thing to do in any given situation? So that's going to express itself by, are you on the right side of the chart, the left side of the chart, or the middle of the chart? That's basically how these things work. And we also said that from a cognitive point of view, these patterns of three also play out. Because the way in which we process information, at this point I'm just kind of revising, I'm sorry if this is old news, okay? But we also said that we start with abstract knowledge that we hear, then we analyze it and process it in order to figure out how it works and when it works and all of the conditions in which it works, right? And we really get a good grasp of it, and then we internalize it and make it actually experientially real to us. And that will be wisdom, chachma, followed by bina, understanding, and then followed by das, which is integrated knowledge, right? So you'll see that these things, depending on where you are on the chart, are going to plug into some of the threes and twos that we described. Yes? Oh, you're just taking pictures. Okay. Now, I want to add one more dimension, and this is where it's going to get interesting, and we're going to talk about tonight the interplay between what kabbalistically is described as the masculine and feminine energies in the universe. So, on Seder night, we have threes. We have a pattern of three, particularly in one area. Where do we see something that is expressed three times on Seder night? Tick-tock. There's three of something at the Pesach Seder.
Sons.
Three what?
Sons.
No. Yes, there are four sons. We're going to get to that in a minute. There's
like you repeat it three times?
No, you repeat the Manish Tanah three times. I mean, actually, maybe you had two siblings, so you each said the Manish Tanah. No, we don't repeat it three times. Most of us. There's three matzahs, right? There's three matzahs at the table. Okay. Now there are three matzahs at the table, but there's four of something else that we consume at the Seder.
Drink wine.
4 cups of wine. Very good. Okay. What's your name? I'm sorry.
Kylia.
Kylia. Hi. All right. So we have 3 matzahs and 4 cups of wine. There is a midrash, an oral teaching in the Torah, that says that there is a deep symbolism to these foods. It says that the 3 matzahs correspond to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the 3 patriarchs, and the 4 cups of wine correspond to the 4 matriarchs, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. The question is, why? What does that mean? Is this just coincidence, or is it just like a nice way of describing 3s and 4s? So the answer is going to be that there's something that is uniquely expressed by the number of 3 and the number 4, and they happen to correspond to the male and female progenitors of the Jewish people. So the question is, why does the masculine element represent 3, and why does the feminine element represent 4? So that's what we're going to try to figure out today. So in order to understand that, we have to go back to what exactly does, at least Kabbalistically, the masculine and feminine elements mean. What do these energies mean? So I'm going to begin this discussion by making a disclaimer, which is the following. Masculine and feminine do not mean men and women, okay? We can get into a annoying debate about whether there are psychological differences, innate psychological differences between men and women, but we're not. However, what we can say, and most people do say, is whether you believe it's biological or whether you believe it's sociological, on a bell curve, there are certain tendencies that men have and women have. And by bell curve, I mean there's like the 80% of the people who are roughly on average, and there's some people who trend way to one extreme and trend, way not like, let's say, the average of their gender. You guess what I'm saying? So if we could throw out an example, one example that Simon Baron-Cohen, who is a Cambridge professor who studies autism, but he also studies gender differences in the brain, says that on average, men tend to be more technically oriented. In other words, they prefer working with things and ideas and tools and computer programs, for example. And women, on average, bell curve, tend to prefer working in relationships. So that's why you'll have a lot more women represented in healthcare and education, because they are relationship-oriented professions. Now, as I said, this does not mean that all women prefer relationships and all men prefer computer science. What it means is that there's a bell curve, and on average, statistically speaking, men tend to be more interested in things and women tend to be more interested in people, right? So that's just an example that I'm giving. Have I said anything so controversial that you want to get out of the room and walk away yet? No? We're good? Yes? Everyone would pretty much be in agreement there? Yeah, okay, fine, good. But what that does mean, however, is that there are some women who are so to the extreme of one of the bell curve that they far outpace most men in their preference for working in computer science, right? And there's some men who are so relationship oriented that they far outpace most women. So that's the way this thing works. Okay, so what the Kabbalistic understanding of the masculine and feminine means is roughly the following. The masculine energy tends to be aligned more with the right side of your chart. In other words, expansion-oriented, right? Creation-oriented, okay? And the feminine and potential-oriented, and the feminine energy tends to align with that which wants to limit and constrict and bring out into fruition. So the simplest example of this, if we were to kind of play this out in real life, would be biology. So the way that humans are created is men contribute this almost near infinite potential of life, but nothing comes of that until it is contained, captured, nurtured, and given limitation and definition by the feminine element. Okay? So just to give you a sense. Now, what some people will say is you'll get this tendency when you look at how men and women view relationships. Again, on average, bell curve, all of that's disclaimer. So for example, men tend to be seen as people who like the potential of relationships. They like getting into relationships, but potential is kind of, that's what they're pretty good at. And they like the thrill of the chase, but after that, it gets hard for them to commit. So you have a lot of men with a lot of commitment issues. Women, on the other hand, once they're in a relationship, they very much like to nurture that relationship, but sometimes, even if a relationship is an unhealthy relationship, they will want to continue to try to make that relationship work because they're into taking something and nurturing it and nurturing it and nurturing it, and to start something new is often a painful thing for them. So again, these are broad sweeps and broad strokes and generalizations, but that's the way you would see something like that turning out. Okay? So there's a very, very, very conceptual way that the masculine and feminine represent themselves Kabbalistically, which is in two shapes. The male element is often seen as a line, and the female element is often seen as a circle. So I'll explain what those two things represent. So in this classic book that I'm sure some of you have heard of called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. You heard of this book? Very, very, very popular relationship book from the 1990s, the best decade ever, and it was like the best decade to grow up. It was like everything was happy. America, the West won the Cold War. Life was good. Liberal democracy was going to triumph all over the world. It was just a matter of time. The music was just like fun and happy. Blink-182, the Goo Goo Dolls. Sorry, I'm just reliving the nostalgia of my childhood. Okay.
Those are happy bands?
Oh my gosh, Blink-182 is like the happiest band ever, you know? Yeah, for sure. So, it's like alternative rock. It's just like fun. Okay. So in this book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, I should never have gone off on that tangent. It just like took me way off to the 1990s, right? So in this book, he says that there's a typical scene that plays out in many, many, many relationships that he has counseled. Okay? A woman comes home and she starts telling her husband about her job. And she says, "Oh, you wouldn't believe Melinda today at the office was just so mean and so rude. And she criticized everything I did. And it was just terrible. And she just really makes my life so difficult at the workplace." And the husband says, "Wow, gosh, we should really, you should tell your boss about Melinda. That's what we're going to do. We're going to get her, censured. We're going to have her criticized, and we're going to have her give her a stern." She says, "No, but you don't understand. Melinda, when she knows just how to push all of the right buttons, and she just really makes me feel so terrible about myself." And the husband says, "Okay, great. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to get all the other employees in on this too, and we're going to stage an intervention." She's like, No, you're not listening to me." And he says, "Of course I'm listening to you. I can repeat every single thing that you just said to me." And she says, "Oh, you never listen. You don't understand me," right? So, okay, in that scene, the author says, what's going on? He says, what is she looking for? What is she looking for? Sympathy, empathy. She wants to sit and dwell in her emotions and to be given validation for what she's feeling, right? And what is he offering her? Solutions, right? He's offering her solutions. What he thinks when he hears her arguing and complaining about Melinda is, I want you to solve the problem. Because men think in a very linear way. Tend to think in a very linear way. They say, look, here's our issue, and we need to create a linear solution and try to get to the end goal. That's what we're trying to do here. And she says, no. I'm not trying to get to any goal. I want to circle around and around and around and talk about my feelings. So the founder of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, says that women tend to exhibit more often depression more than men. Women tend to get depression more than men, and he says the reason why is because women tend to ruminate more than men. So what does it mean to ruminate? How about in animals? So ruminating is when you have many stomachs, right? When you chew your cud and they vomit up it goes back into a previous stomach and they can kind of re-chew what they've already chewed before. And it's a good metaphor for what we do psychologically, is that he says women tend to take something that's happened and process it and process it and process it and process it and process it. Unfortunately, when you dwell that much on a negative experience, it can make you very, very sad, right? So he says, when men get upset, they go for a run. They're like, okay, let me just beat the crap out of a punching bag or something, and then I'll move on, right? But women want to redigest and redigest. So the idea there is that what this is symbolized by is a line and a circle. The line is that which wants to get straight to the end, that wants to create and go and move and get to an end. But a woman wants to create a space, wants to dwell and circle back and circle back and circle back. And so what you have here is this distinction between the idea of I want to create a solution versus I want to create space and be in a certain mindset, in a certain state. And so what you'll often have is this dichotomy between, let's say, doing and being. Right? You've heard this great, wonderful cliche, we're not human doings, we're human beings, yada, 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 6 days of the week and Shabbat, all of that good Jewish stuff that you hear on a Shabbaton, right? But of course, these two break down into the masculine element and the feminine element. The masculine element says, I want to go out, I want to create, I want to expand, I want to do, I want to conquer, right? And the woman says, hold on a second, let's just be, let's just appreciate, let's just live in the moment, be where we are right now. Okay? And of course, that corresponds to going out 6 days a week and say you have to work and you have to do and you have to build the world and you have to make progress. And then the feminine element says, yes, 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 but let's circle back and let's appreciate where we are and how far we've come and what we've done so far and be with family and be with friends and be where we are in Shabbat. Yeah.
So why is Shabbos only one day?
Why is it only one day? Okay, good. Good question. Good question. So we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that in a second. But in any case, let's just, I'm just kind of building the picture here of what is the masculine element and what's the feminine element, of course. And of course, if you want to use your imagination, the line in the circle has certain representations in human biology and anatomy and all of those things. This is also a reason why it's interesting, the representation is flipped, but one of the beautiful ideas of a wedding is that you're giving of yourself to her and she's giving of herself to you. And so what's happening is she's sticking out her finger and you're putting a ring on the finger because you're kind of saying that I'm only complete when you give me of the masculine element, I give you of the feminine element, and that's how it works. Okay, beautiful. So we really do need both of these elements. But what ends up happening, and this is to answer your question, Shira, is that when we go out, there are many, many, many different possibilities of expression when we want to be creative, right? We can create mentally, emotionally, physically. We can express ourselves in, according to the Torah, 39 different essential ways of expressing ourselves creatively in the world. We color, we build, we write, we cook, yeah? Okay. However, when it comes to being in the moment and being present, that can all of those creative abilities can be encapsulated in one space. There's only one type of being in the present. So all of those different masculine creative abilities can be captured and expressed through essentially one feminine element of holding space and nurturing and bringing to fruition all of those different elements. Okay? So that's why you're going to have many, many different avenues of the masculine and there's going to be one element of the feminine which can express all of those different things. Okay? That doesn't make the masculine better than the feminine or anything like that, right? That's just the way it is. There is only one present. There is only one being. There's a lot of different types of doing. And in a certain sense, the being element is far more holistic than the doing element. But of course you need both, because if you're just too solution-oriented, then Hi, Sammy. Yeah, come grab a chair. There's a chair over there. The solution element, you just end up being very, very... you want to just solve all problems and you're a bit too linear and you kind of bulldoze people and everything is for the sake of progress, right? And, that's kind of like the Western world. So the Western world is very much masculine oriented. Then you're going to have the Eastern world, let's be Buddhists and be present, right? And you'll be very at one and at peace, but you won't ever do anything in the world, right? So do you mind if we just, if you want to scoot in, and just close the door. So the feminine element will be more aligned with the East. And of course, what's fascinating is that the Jewish homeland is situated exactly in the one tiny body of land that connects the entire eastern continent of Asia with the entire western continents of Europe. And Africa is kind of its own breed, its own kettle of fish. But the idea is that the Jewish essence combines both of those things. The linear as well as the circular, which is why we say that as Jews, we are both interested in moving the world towards a process, towards a goal. But at the same time, we are very, very aware that time is cyclical in a very real way, and we keep coming back to similar themes, and we keep replaying the same concept of freedom every spring, and the same concept of gathering ourselves in every fall. And that's why we see time not as a straight line and not as a circle, but as a spiral, right? So yeah, Alan.
What energy would you say, like tikkun olam is? Like
Fixing the world.
fixing it? Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Like what category would that fall in?
Yeah, so
Binary.
that's kind of falls under the masculine energy. So you want to, why would that be? Why is fixing the world a masculine concept?
Solution oriented.
Solution, we want to fix things. I want to fix things, right? So if you lived in the ancient Near East, before the Axial Age, before 1200, before the Common Era, before the Jews came on the scene, basically, everyone saw time as a circle, right? And you live and you die and you are where you are, and there's no such thing as making the world a better place. Life is what life is. Then post 1200 BCE, you have a lot of offshoots of Judaism which say, life is the Jews kind of come onto the scene and say, wow, we can actually fix the world. We can change things. The world is moving somewhere. It's not like the universe is just eternal, was, is, and always will be. It's that there was a beginning, there is a middle, and there will be an end, right? That's a uniquely Jewish contribution to world thought, which is a really cool idea. However, some people took it too far. The Western world said, everything is progress. The Enlightenment said, we're all about progress. We're all about just creating solutions. So the Western Enlightenment was very much a masculine-oriented philosophy. The Jews would say, well, hold on a second, because there's also a circle to time. Okay, so now, if we were to take a look at this sheet, we would say all of these three things here, whether you're in the cognitive or the emotional or the physical, are going to be expressed in some, whatever plane you're on, it's going to be expressed by three things: a right, a left, and a center, right? And these are going to be the Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, these contributions of how fundamentally we can express ourselves in the world, okay? However, there's got to be one vessel, one conduit, one receptacle, something that holds and nurtures and brings out into reality all of these things. And that's going to be the thing at the very, very bottom, what is called here Malchut, or kingship. What it means is that's the expression of all of these higher elements. Without this, you have absolutely nothing. Everything remains in abstraction. Everything remains in the mind, or everything remains up there, floating up in the sky. But Malchus, the kingship, the kingdom, really, is what expresses it. And the reason why it's called Malchus is because in a kingdom, you have the king who represents the unification of the will of everybody in the kingdom. But it's the kingdom itself that expresses that will. It's the peasants and the farmers and the soldiers and the artisans and the merchants, right? All of those people represent the kingdom. We, in this world, are represented by this bottom thing here. We are that, which is why the Jewish people are often synonymous, the entirety of the Jewish people are often synonymous with what's called the feminine element of the divine. That's called the Shekhinah. Anybody heard of that word, the Shekhinah, which means that which dwells, right? So we are, in a certain sense, that, because the feminine element is taking all of these high, airy-fairy, lofty spiritual concepts and say, but what does that mean? It means we're making them all real in this physical world. So this physical world is really the feminine element of all of these masculine things that are coming down, okay? All right, so where does this get us with Pesach? What time is it?
15 past.
Oh, God, okay, fine, I'll wrap up in 3 minutes, okay? All right, where does this get us with Pesach? The three matzahs represent the three patriarchs. This is literally the bread and butter of the DNA of the Jewish people. This is the creative aspect of saying, if you want to know what makes up the Jewish people, it's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They brought this reality into existence. They dreamt up this idea of different ways of what it means to express divinity and godliness into the world, and that's the things that we eat. And you know what? You need bread to keep you alive, yeah? Without eating flour and water, you will die, okay? However, if you just eat bread and water, you are alive, but you're not engaged in any significant way. In order to be really full, in order to be a three-dimensional human being, literally, because matzah is two-dimensional, in order to be a fully fleshed out human being, you need a bit of that human element, the thing that makes you vibrant, the thing that makes you the life of the party. And what is that, Alan?
Yeast.
No! It's
Air.
It's wine. It's wine. It's the thing that opens you up emotionally. It's the thing that allows you to express. What are we doing all night? We're telling stories. We're engaging with the past. We're sparking our imagination and our memory. And that is done through wine. That's done through wine. The things that make this thin matzah into reality, that's the feminine element. And that's why it's characterized by the four matriarchs. And that's why you're going to have, when I come home and I see that my daughter has had a hard day of school, and I'm saying, well, let me draw out a blueprint for you for how to solve your problems, and my wife is like, but she's a human being. Let me sit with you and let me give you a hug and let me understand your problems, and then we can try to work out a solution after that. Right? She's far better at this than I am. So I think about things in this very linear, abstract way, but my wife is really the one who can actually engage with a human being and make it real and bring it down and make it tangible. And that's essentially what the feminine element is doing. So we have two schemas here, which I've kind of laid out for you. One is the line and the circle, and that's going to be all of these things represent the linear element, and then the circular element, the thing that holds space, the thing that creates the dimension of volume, so to speak, at the bottom here, and that's the feminine element. And in addition, we've said that whenever you see a pattern of four, it's usually going to be some combination of this side, this side, this side, and then expressed in the fourth. And so you'll see this in many, many, many different places. So for example, one example, because I know we have to go, I know you all want to try out the VR, is you have the four-letter name of God, right? So the first letter of the Yud is going to be wisdom, which is this tiny little dot. It's just this kind of received wisdom. The Hey is where you take that dot and you flesh it out, and you make it into literally a box. It takes on dimension. And then the Vav is going to be that line in the middle, because a Vav is basically just a line. And then the final Hey is going to be this thing here at the bottom, the thing that receives and expresses all of those things together. Now, there's a lot more to go into here when we see lots of different fours in the Torah. And of course, the Pesach Seder itself is full of fours, right? 4 sons and 4 questions and lots and lots and lots of fours, which are all expressing that, because the whole idea of the Pesach is to take some abstract reality and make it real for us, to give it volume and depth. But that's basically the idea. And so this is going to be the masculine and feminine element as it plays out mystically, kabbalistically, and all over the Torah as well. So with that, hopefully you will be able to understand most of the arguments you get into with your significant other, and you'll be able to understand why men behave the way that they behave sometimes, right? As one of my rabbis said, I always tell my female students, ladies, men aren't evil, they're just stupid. So you just gotta bear with them. Okay, so enough male bashing. Okay, I hope this was interesting, insightful. Yes, any questions? I'm happy to take them.
Isn't matzah quite restrictive though? Because it's starting a process, it's starting a potential, and then you're stopping it.
Right.
You're baking it.
Yeah. So the idea is like this: is that potential, infinite potential, it's a flash in the pan, right? It's there and then it's gone. It's like inspiration. So the idea of matzah is that it's supposed to be quicker than time. Quicker than time. We don't want it to be in the dimension of time, which is why they had to rush out of Egypt, because we say we can be above time when we leave. We want to be faster than that. The feminine element, which is wine, actually requires time in order to be wine. The key ingredient of wine is time. It's the only way that the sugars break down and turn into alcohol. So matzah is something that's quicker than time, and wine is something that absolutely necessitates the use of time in order to make it time. So that's
So
the idea.
Women are
Again, it's less restrictive. It's more whenever you take an idea and bring it out into reality, you by definition have to put boundaries, right? You have to define that big grand idea of yours. But what you're really doing is you're nurturing and expressing that abstract idea. So whenever you bring anything out into expression, that's the feminine element. So wine is fully brought out through the use of time to express that which is hidden inside of the grape. But matzah has not been given any time to do that. It remains up in the theoretical stratosphere. And that, I guess, concludes. Are there any other questions? Feel free to shout out while they start. This is fun. Any other questions about how the masculine and feminine plays out, how it works?
women more in like the physical dimension today?
Yes. So so people will often say, okay, and again, I want to be very careful here and not say that all women are like this and all men are like that, but that will explain, for example, why there is a lot more attention that's paid, for example, in the Torah to a woman's beauty, right? And why you could argue that women have a tendency to care more or focus more, and why society, let's say, places more care and focus on a woman's beauty, because physical beauty is much more of something that's physically expressed, as opposed to male beauty, if you could even call it that. Yeah. Yes.
Is this one of the reasons why we refer to Hashem in a male way?
Yes. So when we refer to that which is creating so the way that God relates to the Jewish people is in many cases that which creates, and then we're there to catch that spark of creation and then nurture and turn it into something physical and expressed. So we are, in a certain sense, the feminine element to God's masculine. When that shifts, and sometimes it does, and God becomes the feminine, is, for example, when we talk about the Shekhinah, right, the divine presence which dwells in the temple. And what happens in the temple is when we give something, so to speak, to God. And that's when we offer sacrifices to Him, right? Now, obviously, He doesn't need anything, but that role-playing is where that takes place. And that's where God takes on an element of the feminine. Yeah. So there you go. Cool?